Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final webinar for our Telework series, Preparing Managers and Employers for the Hybrid Environment. This webinar is recorded by the Houston-Galveston Area Council and sponsored by the Houston-Galveston Area Council, which I meant to say. Commute Solutions is a service of the Houston-Galveston Area Council in partnership with the Texas Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration. We offer tools and resources for regional transportation agencies, area employers, universities, local governments, and other organizations to reduce peak period traffic congestion and improve our air quality. Next slide, Greg. And quickly, I just want to run over a few housekeeping tips. When there's time for questions and answers, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box, and that way we can cover as many questions as possible. Next slide, Greg. So today's agenda includes, we're going to talk about 2021 workplace trends. We're going to dive into hybrid work tips and directions, and we'll also expound on manager tips and employee tips as well. Next slide. My name is Deborah Mayfield. I am the project manager for the Commute Solutions program. We have a Telework agreement with a team of consultants with over 30 years of national experience to help us implement, expand, and improve telework programs. This work is fully funded by the Commute Solutions program to ensure that our region is competitively positioned for the future of work in the Houston-Galveston area. And that team includes Elham Shirazi and Ali Valeka. So we're going to take it away, and we'll go to the next slide, and we welcome Elham to present this portion of our webinar.
Thank you, and good morning. We thought that it would be probably a good moment to look at some of the trends that have been happening in, in the work culture. And let's go to the next slide. First and foremost, in thinking about your hybrid program, it would be really good if you can tie it to some bottom line issues that impact your employer. And obviously the biggest question has always been, will they be working? And I think the pandemic has given us a good chance to understand that yes, people have been working, and at a minimum productivity stayed the same for most jobs or has improved. A lot of employees are also looking for flexibility these days, and recruitment and retention are becoming very important as we call this period the period of big resignation, because a lot of people are looking at changing jobs, they're looking at moving, and they are looking for more flexibility. Obviously, morale is important, and even if your organization is not open to 2 or 3 days of teleworking a week, even one day can be a big difference from what they were doing before. Obviously, what we used to call a lot of these programs was a telework program, and today the more common name has become a hybrid program. So, which means that employees work both within at the office and also in their homes. Generally, the employees who can telework are happier. Some people don't like working at home, but it's typically a smaller percentage. But especially during the pandemic, they feel that this has been a morale booster. And for some organizations, it's been a great chance to look at their infrastructure and see if they need all this space that they have been leasing or that they own for just having a one-to-one ratio, meaning one cubicle or one office for every employee. And some people are looking at having some desk sharing, when, given that people may not be in on the same day. Obviously, one of the biggest reasons that everybody likes the idea of a hybrid workplace is reducing commuting hours and stress. And we know that, commuting in Houston is very difficult. I'm from California, so I feel your pain. And actually, I sometimes even think yours might be bigger than ours. But I know that, we're still well ahead of most of the regions in terms of traffic. And to this whole discussion, we do want to add that, yes, teleworking is a way to be resilient for organizations in times of emergency. And as we all know, the pandemic has been ongoing, and unfortunately with new variants, bringing people back to the office full time may be difficult. Let's go to the next slide, please. Just a few trends. Over 70% of employees and managers want to continue flexibility. And this is based on a Microsoft survey of a lot of employers. Excuse me. A lot of decision makers are looking at the redesign of their physical space, because it may, for many, become a way to bridge those who are remote and those who are in the office. Yet at the same time, overall, people crave in-person time with their teams. So we all know, we've all missed our teammates, and this keeps coming up in survey after survey. Let's keep moving, please. One of the issues, which I would say is a negative byproduct of teleworking during the pandemic, is that although productivity is very high, it is masked by an exhausted workforce, which goes from meeting to meeting. So one issue that we really urge you as decision makers, as managers, to do is to try to really reassess, thank you, Cynthia, to reassess if meetings are necessary. There are different ways, to treat meetings. Maybe it's when we have to get together to discuss something, but this culture of going from meeting to meeting has become very difficult for people to be doing project work. And this data is based on Microsoft's, again, this was Microsoft based, and it was of many organizations, but just look at how many more meetings we're having. And we really need to nip this in the bud as we, move forward, and we'll talk about some ways to do it. Next slide, please, Greg. One of the other changes that has happened, and this is a positive one, is that work has become more human. And obviously, we've met each other's pets or families. Sometimes it's great, but sometimes it's been a little bit out of control, and we really do need to create some boundaries, around how we deal with children who might be, on video. Typically, the pets are staying very quiet, I've noticed, but some of the kids are not. So we'll get to this. Everything is about setting boundaries while you are, working remotely. And some of these numbers were higher in education, travel and tourism, and healthcare. Let's move on. So basically, the only thing I will talk to on this slide is that a lot of leaders are doing better in the pandemic environment and in this hybrid environment than employees are. Business leaders, 61% of them say they're thriving, while only 38% of employees say that they're thriving. Let's go on to the next slide. So what is at stake? And this is a really important fact that we need to be aware of, because it surely was not yet a fact, but a lot of different sources did talk about how coming out of the pandemic will result in a great period of resignations. And we have already seen this happen. Just in April, 4 million people left their jobs, and a lot of people are not only thinking about changing their jobs, but they're also thinking about moving to another area, or making a complete change in their career. Okay, let's keep moving. Greg, one more. So the way forward. Obviously, the way forward is to make sure that we have a plan that also empowers people for, having flexibility, but also empowers employees to take a bigger stand in determining their deliverables, their objectives, and being, really on top of the work that is being expected on them. Accountability does not go away in this environment. Many employers are investing, as I said before, in creating space that basically provides a bridge to those who are in the office on some days and to those who may be working remotely on others. I think we're going to be in this place for quite a way and a while. And some states have actually even lowered the number of people who can be together indoors and outdoors. I don't think that change has happened in Texas, but I even read some data yesterday that the state of Hawaii is limiting people outdoors to only 25, being the max within a group that can get together. So we really do need to figure out how we bring people together. And as I mentioned before, we want to make sure that we get rid of some of the exhaustion that is being caused by constant interactions, which are digital. Don't forget, the phone still works well too. And so we do want to also make it a priority in terms of how we rebuild our culture and our social capital. Culture is very important in this environment. And, we also do need to be aware that obviously, talent is everywhere. And although there may be limitations for some organizations in terms of their workers' comp and, other insurance issues, but that, sometimes people are finding that for a job that allows for 100% remote, they're getting a lot more applications than for a job that only allows it 1 day a week. So next slide, please. I think I talked about this already, and there are a lot of job postings. As you can see, the job postings on remote jobs increased more than 5 times, and we've talked about people looking to relocate. Let's move on. And obviously culture is critical, as I said, and we do need to make sure that we still have a culture, that it's present in the organization, but also outside of the organization. So this is going to require a lot of intentional effort by leaders and executives, and making sure, that they keep talking or sending maybe some short emails about the company's purpose, and how we're all tied together by certain, mission and objectives. And the other thing that's very important is for managers to focus on accountability. So as I mentioned before, both employees have to be accountable and managers have to focus on that, because obviously if we don't hold people accountable for their work, that's not a healthy work environment. Right. And with teleworking, none of that goes away. Let's go to the next one. So some ways to sustain your culture. First of all, be very visible. This is a period of transparency. So it's good, to share ideas, to send maybe company-wide, emails or announcements, just, having a message of hope and also appreciating employees. It's very important that in this culture, which is, hybrid, that managers and executives and everybody remain accessible, so that there is open communication. In fact, A lot of people think that this even opens up communication more, you know, from leadership to employees, you know, during this period. Let's move on. You also want to invest in making sure that the office is a place where employees want to be. And so a lot of times people think, oh, we have to come to the office to meet. That's not true. Sometimes we have to meet, you know, still through Zoom or through Teams or go to webinar, or any of those kinds of platforms, because we cannot even fit everybody that's needed maybe in a collaborative space inside, you know, the office. Some of your meeting rooms may be small, but we also want to make sure that the office is somewhere where people come to also be close to the culture of the organization. They may be in when people from other departments are in, but it still helps. Some people come to the office to rejuvenate. Some people don't like working at home every day. They also want to come in and see their coworkers. So a lot of this factors in, and sometimes for training, it's a good idea to bring people in so they can get hands-on. Let's move on. So now we're going to switch gears and get directly into manager tips. Let's move on, Greg, please. One of the, I would say, themes that have emerged during the pandemic is that we have found that managers have to lead with empathy, which means that a lot of times they know a little bit more about the employee's life. So it's not just managing work, but it's also helping them manage work life, because everything, in some cases, is still under one roof, but also, you know, being open to flexibility, and also being aware if staff's getting depressed, or if, you know, staff feels isolated. So we're kind of going a step further. And, you know, so at the same time, managers should be available to help develop skills, and that, you know, we need to be open to managing in different ways. Micromanaging has become a product of some of managing employees today, but we do want to get away from that and make sure organizations are very much objective and deliverable and time frame oriented. Let's move to the next slide. So how can managers support employees? Obviously be available, you know, for them to, so that they can feel like they can call you, they can email you, stay connected with them. Recognize that some people may be feeling lonely, and that's common of people who pretty much live alone, and don't have other housemates. We want to make sure that your employees are also aware of any employee assistance programs that are available or other resources, because we have seen a rise in employees using those resources. So they may not want to talk to their manager about feeling, you know, fatigued or lonely or disconnected, but maybe they can do that with somebody else. And typically HR can connect you to those kinds of resources. Let's keep moving. One of the elements that ties with this exhaustion at the workplace is using the terminology of synchronous versus asynchronous. And we're borrowing from the terminology that exists in schools. And really what asynchronous means is the times that we don't need to be together to get work done, versus synchronous, which means that it's when we have to be together to learn or to talk about a project. So it really calls for meetings, having a really good agenda beforehand, and making sure that, you know, we've scheduled for you know, for people's for people's availability. A lot of times we're seeing that 60-minute meetings are now 30-minute meetings, or even if it's a 60-minute meeting, a lot of people try to finish it 15 minutes before to give their employees and other managers space to breathe, get a glass of water, or maybe do some, respond to some emails. And it's really good to send documents ahead of the meeting. So sometimes that time is not spent presenting, but is actually the time for a meeting is spent on discussing the key items of what was already in a brief or a presentation. Let's move to the next one. Measuring productivity has obviously been the million-dollar question, and it's still it's interesting how still a lot of there are employers who meet in the beginning of the day or ask their employees to meet in the beginning of the day, and also have an end of the day meeting to make sure that their work got done. But there are better ways of doing this, and we don't want to manage by meetings. This chart is from Sherm in 2014, and I do want to point out that even back in 2014, and that's why we're using this old slide, when we asked managers how is productivity measured when employees are teleworking, the top response was their responsiveness, they're meeting goals and parameters, there's an honor system, and people have the same methodology in place for people who are on-site versus remote. And very down on that list is organizations monitoring employees via tracking software, and that was 9%. I understand that there's a lot of software that's being developed right now to enable employers to do that, but measuring productivity is not about keystrokes, and it's not about someone just being online for a long time. Sometimes it's really getting some time to do a project, and we all know you can just hit keystrokes and it may mean nothing. So let's go to the next slide. So in managing a hybrid team, we want to make sure that the leaders have bought in, the managers have bought in to this kind of a system, and that they invest in the right tools to enable managers in managing a workforce that may be remote. And we want to make sure that everything we do, we include remote workers. And they might be a mile away from the office, but again, making sure that there's a platform for them to be included makes a big difference. A lot of people are worried about out of sight, out of mind. And we again encourage visibility, make sure that there's training. A lot of managers are still doubting their own ability to manage remote staff. So to that, I would say, please invest in making sure that you have some management by objectives, which is an old term, MBO, that your managers can take advantage of. And also through the Commute Solutions program, we do offer some training for managers and teleworkers. Let's move to the next slide. Very important that I would say on a weekly or once every 2 weeks that a manager meets with their teleworker, or simply if they're at a place where they can do this themselves, ask the employees to come up with a list of what they're going to do during that week or 2 week period with time frames, some kind of agreed upon work plan. And this does not have to be anything that is lengthy. It can just be a list of, here's what I hope to deliver, and here's how it's related to our objectives. So, and you do want to make sure, that there's back and forth on the status, and that you're helping employees as needed, just like you would if they were in the office. And remember, now there might be days where they're in and days that they might be out. Let's move to the next one. Your style of management with your employees will really not drastically change. However, we use different styles for different projects even sometimes. So in some cases, we do have to provide a lot of direction. And some of your employees will always need that. And it may be that they're also working on something that has, very, I would say that has metrics. So if you're a call center, working in a call center, it's easy to give them the goals, and they just maintain those goals or hit above them. In some cases, we're helping employees transition from giving them a lot of direction to one where they know their job, but we're still coaching them, because maybe because of the length of time that they've been with the organization has been short, you still need to kind of be helping them over their shoulder. When employees get to the point where you're advising them or you can delegate to them, you say 2 sentences and they know exactly what needs to be done. I would say that's a mature workforce, and that will actually drain less of your resources as a manager. So the more employees can figure it out themselves and be just telling you, here's what I'm doing, and then after that time frame, you can have a meeting. Try to have a meeting face-to-face. Again, it could be a virtual meeting. Let's move on.
Interrupt you, please, in this portion. If you can, and this is from someone in our audience, if you could please elaborate on managers focusing on accountability. How are employees able to ensure managers are accountable as well?
Well, I think it is when Allie's providing a manager's not taking these steps, how an employee can do it. So let's get through that portion and then we can come back. Is my audio breaking?
It was. It's flowing right now. So keep talking and we'll respond again.
Okay, so let's keep that question till the end, and let's see if, once we hear the employee side of it, that it helps. This is a very simple example of a task schedule that an employee can put together, or, a manager can help an employee put together, which is just, as you can see, it's nothing too complicated, but I would not say do this for every day. This should be done, on a timely basis, as I said, once a week or once every other week, just to keep everyone on point and to allow managers to know what they can actually expect in terms of a deliverable and what was accomplished. And then during the meeting, they can talk about what wasn't being done. Let's move on to the next one. Well, obviously, you are in a period where communications have definitely changed, but I think it's important that we think through what has changed. Obviously, one of the interactions that aren't happening are those impromptu ones when people are in the office, like going to the water cooler, etc. It's really good to integrate some of those in a digital format, so that you may want to have during that 15-minute break in the morning or in the afternoon, that there could be an online presence if employees want to talk to each other. So, and that might be a good time to meet people who may not even be in your department, but that has to be managed. Or sometimes there's that coffee that we have, that e-coffee. Of course, you bring your own coffee. And I think some organizations are grappling with too many platforms. So you do want to make sure that IT is clear about what can be used. In larger organizations, maybe that's okay because, there are a lot of big departments. But I think it's good to have some agreement. So people are not being, are not going from different communication channel to the next, and it might get a little bit overwhelming. A discussion of flex hours is critical, and a discussion of core hours. Are they same as they were before? Can employees change those? Is there, are employees able to flex them? And is it okay to interrupt by a text, by a phone call? And I think sometimes we we really should accept those, because again, in a digital environment, it's almost important. And if a person can't answer you, they just will say, answer you later, right? Or if you've called them, they can't pick up, they can leave a message. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Some issues to consider around communications is accessibility, meaning making sure that everyone knows when other folks are available, making sure that we have contact numbers, or if it's a soft phone that everybody in the organization uses it, a soft phone works off of your laptop or your computer, that there is ongoing communication. We want to make sure that your calendars are updated, and if you use Outlook, you want to make sure that all your meetings are on there. But also, if there's personal non-available time that an employee has carved out with their manager, that also appears on that schedule, so that others are aware. Or if you have project time, that's important too. And we do want to make sure that we're creating virtual places where people can brainstorm and do water cooler talks. And FaceTime helps. If you're in a small meeting as a manager, I would recommend asking your employees to show themselves, because it's easier to read people's gestures and faces, when you can see each other. Obviously, in a meeting of 30 or 40, that's impossible. And I do want to reintroduce the concept of, don't forget you have a phone. And sometimes a phone is the best way to communicate. Let's go to the next one. We want to make sure that also as managers, there's direction on attendance and participation. Just as I mentioned, for those who are there and not, meetings should have a clear agenda and topics. A few times a week, some organizations just do this twice a week, which is a 15-minute huddle, just to help everyone get started. So everybody gets up for 1 minute and says what they're going to do today. You want to, ensure that there's regular interaction to bring people out of, if they've become lonely, and that training's always available, and there are tutorials that employees are available if they have to learn these new technologies. Let's move on to the next one. Finally, I do want to go back to reiterating that sometimes some of these short team meetings are much better. A lot of people are happy that we are actually having shorter meetings, because in the office, some groups used to have 2-hour-long meetings. So people are definitely not missing those kinds of meetings. You want to make sure that trust is a foundation of your program and your approach. I would say as a manager, even now, do try to send weekly messages to improve morale of your employees. Obviously, this situation of the pandemic is not completely over, and we're still dealing with various variants. And yes, short meetings are great. And we do want to make sure that employees can maintain work and life. If you feel like somebody is not managing, their home life, and their kids are constantly in front of the screen, you may, as a manager, want to point out, is there a way for you to get someone else during the time of meetings to, oversee the kids? Or if, you have a partner, that person can do it. And very importantly, address problems as they arise, because they're not going to go away. And as issues come up, I would urge you to talk with your employees. So at this point, Greg, if you can go to the next slide, please. And I'm going to let Allie take over and talk about the employee tips.
Thanks, Elham. I noticed something too, as we were talking about the communications piece, as folks have been, returning to the office and really experiencing kind of a hybrid workplace. Sometimes something good to include on your calendar is those potential travel times throughout the day, right? When folks may be traveling to on-site meetings where it's been a long time since they've traveled on site for a meeting. And so it's not as easy to just look at somebody's calendar anymore and take up 30 minutes of their time. So I think that might be a good addition for us moving forward as well. Greg, if you want to jump to the next slide, I am going to very quickly just hit on some of the employee tips. As many of us have experienced working remotely in some capacity, most likely over the last year and a half, a lot of those tips really do hold true for the hybrid environment. And so, I think to answer the question too about helping keep managers accountable, there's a lot of things that employees can do and that managers can encourage employees to do to kind of help set those expectations for what the hybrid workplace looks like. So next slide, Greg. So obviously as a teleworker or an employee working remotely in a hybrid environment, your role is to make sure that you do have that dedicated workspace, and we'll talk a little bit more about these. Ideally, you're creating a safe, quiet, and productive space, right, to support your overall work and delivery to your team and to your organization. You as an employee can play a role in developing that trusting relationship with your supervisor or manager, like Elham had mentioned, and then, maintaining open communication with your team, whether you're at home or in the office. So next slide. I think one of the things a lot of employees have experienced and kind of thoughts perhaps considerations of what it's like to be at home versus in the office, right, is how your team dynamic is when you're working together on a project. If you've got some people in the office and some people at home, are there things I can do to let my manager know that I'm working? Do I feel isolated, that I miss my coworkers, right? Your hybrid program may only allow employees to come into the office 1 or 2 days a week. And so there may be some of those folks who are craving that in-time FaceTime, in-person FaceTime, right? That they're missing out on that. Also too, keeping yourself organized, right? Thinking about the traveling back and forth from work to home during a hybrid schedule. And then just that kind of lingering worry of distractions in the home. So Greg, let's jump to the next slide. Just as Elham kind of went through the goal setting process with employees, the process is the exact same for employees with their manager. And I think the most important tip here is that if you're not getting the support from your manager in a hybrid environment in terms of goal setting and staying on top of tasks and providing those opportunities for additional assistance and help and guidance, it's you, the employee, should feel empowered to do this process on your own, whether your manager initiates this process or not, right? So defining what it is that you're working on, what those potential deliverables are that show your productivity, coming up with some timeframes to make sure that you're staying on task and on schedule, documenting it. As Elham said, it doesn't have to be anything very formal. Sometimes just a quick chat, right, or a quick half document in a Word document can be really beneficial. And then reviewing that status periodically or as needed, right? It's on you as the employee to raise your hand, ask questions, get clarification, or identify that you may need some assistance or help in finishing your tasks. And a lot of this can also then help you decide in your hybrid work environment what tasks are really good to be done in the office, right? So if you're finding when you're working on specific tasks in your work plan that you constantly need to reach out to Greg to help with, or you've got to call Jamila because you need help with something, right? Maybe you kind of delegate those tasks to the days that you'll be in the office, and Greg and Jamila will be there as well. So it can really help you as an employee kind of organize your work to meet your deadlines, but also make sure that you're being as productive and efficient as you can be. Next slide. Some additional helpful tips. I think a lot of these tips may have gone out the window at the beginning of the pandemic, and I feel like slowly folks are beginning to adapt to these, and they'll remain important in a hybrid environment. Really creating your morning ritual. I remember many years ago, Elham always telling groups of teleworkers, right, when you start your workday, put your badge on. It helps signify to you that you're starting work, just like you might put your badge on as you walk into the office, right, to kind of create that seamless experience, whether you're at home or in the office. Making sure that you are scheduling those breaks. I think one of the things I miss the most about being in the office on a regular basis is being able to walk outside for 10 or 15 minutes to either grab a cup of coffee, right, or just take a lap to kind of clear my mind. And I find myself doing that at home as well. Making sure you take time away from your desk, trying to avoid news and social media, which was definitely probably a larger thing right when the pandemic started, but I think it will continue as things are rapidly changing in our world day to day. And then I think if any of you were on here at the beginning, we talked with Greg about taking vacation and using PTO, that mental break from your work is going to help you perform better either at home or in the office. Next slide. Getting organized, right? I think a safe, dedicated workspace is important no matter where you're working. But I think as you are in a hybrid environment, that becomes even harder as you are schlepping your computer and maybe your cord and papers back and forth. So always making sure that when you start your day at home or at work, that it is as safe as it can be. Establishing that routine, again, making sure that you're using as much of a routine in terms of your starts and stop times as you can. And then coordinating all of your tasks based on what's going on within your organization and that schedule, right? A lot of folks were able to be really flexible over the last year and a half with when they completed tasks and when their start and stop times were. And that's something I think we can all continue moving forward in the hybrid environment, as long as it works within your team and department's goals. Next slide. Ergonomics, this is always the fun one when you've got folks on the computer that I can see your lovely faces, right? But there's a lot of things that you need to take into consideration with your home office setup when you're working in a hybrid environment to make sure that you are being safe. And you may have to kind of regularly look at these things on a daily basis. I think there's a lot that goes into the design of our office spaces that we don't always think about when we're working at home. So making sure that just your desk and your chair, right, that you're creating those 90-degree angles with your elbows and your knees. And if you can't create that, there's probably something that you can slide under your feet to make sure you're getting that angle if your chair is not adjustable. Same thing with, I always have a stack of children's books on my desk that I can always prop things up on if I need some additional assistance to make sure my setup is as ergonomic as possible, as well as your lighting. I have noticed here as we get rainstorms, right, things will get really dark in my office and then it's very hard to see. And so thinking about on a daily basis, how is the lighting impacting your productivity in your home office? On the next slide related to ergonomics, that safety piece I think is so huge. Right, with the cords, take the extra minute to fish your cord behind your desk so that it's out of the way for you or someone else to trip over. Make sure that the furniture that you're using, right, this was probably when you were using your kitchen table, maybe the last March, or using furniture that wasn't really made to be a desk, making sure that all of those things are secure to help keep you safe as well as other folks in your house safe. And then additionally, the noise piece. Ideally, if you can work in a dedicated workspace that has a door, it makes it a lot easier for you to control the noise of where you are, but not everybody is able to do that. And even with kids back at school, right, folks may be coming in the middle of your afternoon, and if you don't have that dedicated space, think about those ways that you can potentially create barriers for that noise and those distractions. Next slide, Greg. Speaking of kids coming off a school bus and those distractions and noises, I think something we've all learned a lot over the last year and a half is how to try to train our households when we're working. And I can speak from experience with a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old who were home with me for many months without my choice, finding little ways to help educate other people in the house that you're working. So usually for me, mine is my headphones. If my kids open the door because I accidentally left it unlocked, right, and they see that I have my headphones on, they know that I'm working and that I'm not to be distracted. However, it is important to find ways to also let people know when it is okay for those interruptions, just as if you were in a meeting at the office and right, the school called the front desk and randomly somebody needs to talk to you, there are interruptions that can be okay during the workday. Obviously, other things here too regarding your materials and equipment, so that folks are not using your work computer to play Roblox. My kids don't do that yet, but I know that that is a thing coming, right? And then also just making sure that you're keeping all of your things safe and setting those expectations for other folks in the house. Next slide, Greg. The final tips, I think if we could kind of wrap all of that up, 5 things I think that would also be really important just for you to think about, I think sharing with your employees, or if you as an employee may be attending this session today, to be thinking about and talking to your manager or supervisor about, is really creating that schedule, trying to keep it as regular as possible. That not only helps you create that routine, but also helps the folks that work with you know your schedule and your routine, and don't be afraid to set boundaries. Right? It's okay to not respond to a message that comes in at 10:30 at night just because you heard a bling on your computer upstairs. Prioritizing our personal hygiene and immune system, just as much as Elham was talking about the empathy that managers are providing to employees, you as the employee need to take care of yourself as well during this time. do your best to stay as connected with your family and friends. Not all of your virtual happy hours or coffee breaks need to be with a coworker, right? It's okay to connect with other folks. Do as much as you can to get fresh air and stay active. As we all know, over the last year and a half, when you are working from home, it's much easier to stay in your seat for 8 hours a day, whereas you'd probably be up walking a lot more if you were in the office. And don't be afraid to share what's going on with you and with your coworkers on what is working for you. Right? Knowing that my kids couldn't read, I couldn't put a sign on the door that said "stay out" or "on a call." So we had to find ways, so that they could understand when was the appropriate time to interrupt. And so I think if you find something that works, don't be afraid to share it. I'm expecting to see a few more chats here of folks who may have also found really good tips to share as they've, managed and figured out how to navigate this hybrid work environment. And with that, I'm excited to pass it back over to Deborah to talk a little bit about the Commute Solutions programs and what we can offer you guys.
Thank you, Allie. Greg, can we go to the next slide, please? Now, I can't reiterate this enough. So this is to employees who are here, employers, managers, staff. The Commute Solutions team, along with our Telework group, our team, we are here to formalize a Telework program to meet your culture. The benefits for participating include no-cost Telework consulting, including policy review, training, and guidance on integrating Telework into your future business plans. We also have a resource library on our website. Next slide. So again, let us help you. We will meet with you one-on-one and create a Telework program or redo your current policy that will meet your culture. Once we work through all of this, we will provide recommendations to help implement your new Telework program. Next slide. And now we have time for questions and answers, and let's begin. I know there were some that were already posted. And I believe for either Elham or Ali, is the 148% increase in meetings taking the place of what would have been a quick phone call or walking to someone's desk pre-pandemic?
Actually, if you look at that chart, not only does it have the increase in meetings, but also the increase in emails and chats and other forms of communication. So in general, we are definitely using a lot more time to communicate back and forth. And so, yeah, that meeting time is really based on the meeting time. But I think no one will argue with the fact that we're flooded with emails on a daily basis. It was great when I was on vacation. I didn't get more than 10 a day. And then I came back and the number very quickly went up to 72 the first day I was back. So we definitely also have to be careful about, emails and all of that. And don't mark everything, like it has to be read right away. Some people like to always mark it red. So be cognizant in how you prioritize your communications. But I'm sure nobody on this, webinar would disagree with the fact that we're meeting a lot. I think we've all felt that during this pandemic.
Elaborate on managers focusing on accountability and how are employees able to ensure managers are accountable as well?
Allie, you want to take that first and then I'll add if necessary?
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I think the big piece, that employees can do to ensure that their managers are accountable, for one, on the goal setting side of just creating those documented conversations, right? Or whether it's a conversation or your plan, right? As an employee, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm sending this over to you. I would say, from the standpoint of making sure that your managers are accountable, they're likely reporting to somebody else right? And so if you're worried about their accountability, perhaps somebody else above them is also worried about their accountability. So I think for you as an employee, always having a plan, knowing what it is you're working towards and what your deliverables are, and then regularly communicating to your manager is probably one of the best things that you can do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, this is about also employees feeling a little bit more independent and becoming self-starters. So I would say seize the power. If your manager's, not, involved in creating those discussions, then ask for them.
Okay, and let me check I know we had some more questions coming in. And for those who are interested in getting a copy of the presentation, please email me directly at deborah.mayfield@h-gac.com or at the email address commutesolutions@h-gac.com. And I do know there was some more comments. Let me look in the regular. Elham and Allie, do most managers truly feel like their team isn't working? That is a trust issue that can create a less than favorable working relationship. Can you comment on that, please?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Because you cut out.
I cut out again. Okay, let me go back to the chat.
It said,
be better?
Yeah, go ahead.
Managers truly feel like their team isn't actually working. That is a trust issue that can create less than favorable working relationship.
I would say that actually what the pandemic did, which was just great, is that a lot of managers and executives also started teleworking. So they have changed their mind. Where they might have been negative towards, the idea of teleworking. What this period did was create trust that, yes, we don't have to be with our employees to watch them get the work done, and that they are capable of doing it. So there has been a lot of trust that has been developed, but however, there are always, some managers that are old school and, they're just not comfortable with people not being with them when they're working. But people can be in the office, and managers can be in the office, and an employee may sit at their desk and not do much. So I think the truth is that we always have to be deliverable based.
Right.
I'd say too, to add on to that, I've heard multiple managers say that an employee who wasn't a top performer in the office is also not a top performer as a teleworker. And so I think that kind of comes back to, the manager's expectations and having those goal setting conversations with employees to set those expectations of what should be accomplished and productivity. And I think when that relationship becomes reciprocal, where the employee knows what's expected and can do the work, and the employee or the manager can articulate that to their employee and set those expectations, that can then start to build that trust. So Cynthia, I don't know if you're coming at this from the employee perspective or the manager perspective, but I think it really does come from both sides to guide that trust.
I think there's another question. Do we still have time? Deborah, it's at the bottom of the chat.
Yes. See it now, and we do have some time.
Okay.
How can managers ensure all communication is communicated to all team members equally?
I think that goes back to the issue of visibility, transparency, making sure that you don't forget to include people on an email or on a message just because they're not there on a particular day. So I think we really do have to adopt a culture that's more inclusive than exclusive. And we all know inclusivity, being inclusionary, is a very big step also that a lot of organizations are, striving towards.
It looks like our time is winding down. We do have a few more minutes. I'll double check for any more questions. And yes, for those who do inquire, we will provide you additional information about the presentation. And following this webinar, we will send an email out to each of you to participate in a brief survey. We encourage you, please, to participate in the survey. And in addition, we will provide a recording of this webinar. And with that said, are there any more comments from Elham or Ali at this time before we close?
I just want to encourage everyone who is on this path to really take the time to work with us. I think you'll find that your job becomes a lot easier if you reach out to Deborah, and we can set up some meetings with you to guide you in this process. We can even, deliver similar presentations to your employees and managers. We can help you with that policy development. We can help you with some degree of evaluation. So please take advantage. The way to get in touch with any of us is really to go through Deborah, and and then you'll see that we will be in touch with you and set up a meeting, and we're very quick to do those. So thank you.
Thank you, Elham. And I like phone calls too. So I do like that conversation. So again, the Commute Solutions team, the Houston-Galveston Area Council, we thank all of you for attending this webinar today. We look forward to more collaboration with each of you, and also to go on our website and look for more information about our upcoming Commute Solutions month in September. Again, thank you, Elham and Ali. We thank you so much. Thank you, Greg, and everyone. Have a great day and stay safe.